Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the Great Hall and tried to keep her face calm. The Galactic Assembly Chamber was the largest room she had ever seen. It stretched upward for hundreds of meters, filled with floating platforms where thousands of alien delegates watched her. Lights of every color blinked and glowed. Strange sounds filled the air as translators worked to convert countless languages into something everyone could understand. She had prepared for this day for months. Earth had been a member of the galactic community for nearly 100 years now. Today was supposed to be simple. A routine review, a few speeches, maybe some minor trade agreements. She would shake some tentacles and claws, smile for the cameras, and go home. She was wrong. High Arbiter Kethvarel rose from his platform. He was a tall creature, nearly 3 meters high, with gray skin that looked like stone and 4 eyes that glowed with pale blue light. He was the leader of the Dominion Coalition, the most powerful group of species in the known galaxy. When he spoke, everyone listened. Fellow delegates, his voice boomed through the translation systems. We gathered today to discuss the status of Earth and its people. Elena felt the first hint of unease. Something in his tone was wrong. For 100 years, we have watched humanity struggle to find its place among the stars, Kethvarel continued. We have been patient. We have been generous. We have given them technology, guidance, and protection. And what have they shown us in return? A massive holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber. Elena's stomach dropped as she recognized the images. They were recordings from Earth's history. Wars, bombs falling on cities, soldiers fighting in muddy trenches, nuclear explosions, starving children, burning forests. Violence, Kethvarel said. Destruction, self-inflicted misery. Laughter rippled through parts of the chamber. Elena heard clicking sounds and whistles that her translator identified as amusement from several species. Their ships are slow, Kethvarel went on. Their weapons are primitive. In 100 years, they have managed to establish only 3 small colonies. 3. The Ithkari built 300 in the 1st century. The Morvathi built 1,000. More laughter. Elena clenched her fists at her sides, but kept her expression neutral. The Ithkari ambassador, a creature that looked like a mix between a spider and a mantis, rose on its platform. Perhaps we should reclassify them, it said with obvious pleasure. Proto-sentient, I believe, is the correct term. They clearly lack the mental capacity for true civilization. The laughter grew louder. Elena saw delegates pointing at her, making gestures she didn't understand but knew were not friendly. I must agree, said the Morvathi delegate, a blob-like being that communicated through color changes in its skin. Earth should be restricted to its home system, permanently, for their own protection, of course. They are like children playing with fire. Eventually, they will burn themselves. Elena stepped forward. I request the right to respond, she said. Her voice was steady, but inside she was shaking with anger. Kethvarel looked down at her with something that might have been pity. Denied, he said simply. We have heard enough from Earth. It is time for the galaxy to decide your fate. The vote happened quickly. Too quickly. Elena realized this had been planned long before today. The Dominion Coalition had gathered its allies, made its deals, and prepared its humiliation. She was never meant to speak. She was only meant to watch. The result appeared on every screen in the chamber. 3,412 in favor, 588 against. Earth would surrender its 3 colony worlds. Human ships would be restricted to a small zone around the solar system. All human technology development would be monitored by coalition observers. Humanity would submit to what they called developmental oversight. They would be watched, controlled, and contained like dangerous animals in a zoo. Kethvarel smiled. At least, Elena thought it was a smile. "The motion passes," he announced. "Earth will comply within 60 standard days or face consequences." The chamber erupted in conversation. Delegates congratulated each other. Some looked at Elena with open contempt. Others seemed bored, already moving on to other business. Elena stood alone in the center of it all. A small delegate from a species she didn't recognize floated down to her level. "I am sorry," it whispered. "Some of us voted against this. But we are few, and they are many." Elena nodded but didn't respond. She was too busy thinking. She pulled out a small device from her pocket. It was a standard diplomatic recorder, something every ambassador carried. But Elena had modified hers years ago. It had captured everything. Every laugh, every insult, every vote, in perfect detail. She pressed a button, and the recording began transmitting directly to Earth, to every government, every news network, every person with a screen. The entire planet would see exactly what had happened here today. Keth Varl noticed her movement. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Elena looked up at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she put the device back in her pocket, turned, and walked toward the exit. "Ambassador Vasquez." Keth Varl's voice echoed through the chamber. "You will answer when spoken to. You will acknowledge the Assembly's decision." Elena did not stop. She did not turn around. She did not say a single word. The massive doors opened before her, and she stepped through. Behind her, she heard confusion, then anger, then something that might have been the first hint of uncertainty. "Good," she thought. "Let them wonder." The doors closed behind her, and she walked down the long corridor toward the human section of the station. Her staff was waiting, their faces pale with shock at what they had witnessed through the broadcast. "Ma'am," her assistant said, "what do we do?" Elena kept walking. "Back everything. Every file, every piece of equipment, every personal item. I want this embassy empty within 6 hours." "Empty? But where are we going?" Elena finally stopped. She turned to look at her team, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Home," she said. "We're going home. And then we're going to have a very long conversation with every government on Earth." "About what?" Elena thought about the laughter, the contempt, the way they had looked at her, at all of humanity, like they were insects to be crushed. "About what happens next," she said quietly. "Because those fools back there just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They just gave 8 billion humans a common enemy." She started walking again, faster now. "And they have no idea what that means." The recording spread across Earth like wildfire. Every screen, every phone, every display showed the same thing. Billions of humans watched as their ambassador stood alone in that massive chamber. They heard the laughter. They saw the contempt. They watched as thousands of alien delegates voted to cage humanity like animals. For the first few hours, there was only shock. People stood in the streets, in their homes, in their workplaces, and stared at their screens in disbelief. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. For a century, humans had been told that joining the galactic community was an honor. They had been told to be grateful. They had accepted limits on their technology, their expansion, their ambitions, all in the name of peace and cooperation. And this was how the galaxy repaid them. Then the shock turned to anger. Protests erupted in every major city. Flags burned. People marched. For one brief, terrible moment, it seemed like humanity might tear itself apart with rage. But something strange happened instead. Old enemies looked at each other and saw something new. Nations that had fought wars for generations suddenly had a common enemy. Political rivals who had spent their careers attacking each other went quiet. Religious leaders who disagreed on everything found they agreed on this. Humanity had been humiliated, and humanity would respond as one. On the third day, Earth went silent. Every communication channel with the galactic community closed. Trade ships that were scheduled to leave stayed in their ports. Diplomatic messages went unanswered. The human embassies on dozens of stations and planets shut their doors and refused all visitors. The galaxy noticed. At first, the Dominion Coalition found it amusing. "They are sulking," Cathvarl told his advisors, "like children who did not get what they wanted. Give them time. They will accept their place." But time passed and the silence continued. Coalition officials sent messages demanding compliance with the Assembly's decision. The messages disappeared into the void. No response came. A diplomatic ship was sent to the human embassy on Concordance Prime. The ambassador found the doors open and the building empty. Every desk had been cleared. Every computer had been wiped. Every piece of art, every photograph, every small personal item was gone. All that remained was dust and silence. The ambassador reported back with confusion in his voice. "It is like they were never here." On Earth, something was happening that the galaxy could not see. In Geneva, the United Nations Emergency Congress had been in session for 19 hours. Every nation had sent representatives. Every faction, every ideology, every rival government had put aside their differences and gathered in the same room. The arguments were fierce at first. Some wanted immediate military action. Others called for patience and negotiation. Some blamed their own governments for accepting the treaty restrictions in the first place. Others pointed fingers at the isolationists who had always warned against trusting aliens. But as the hours passed, the arguments faded. A consensus began to form. It was not built on hope or idealism. It was built on cold, hard reality. Humanity had two choices. They could accept their humiliation, surrender their colonies, and live under alien supervision forever. Or they could refuse. The vote was unanimous. Secretary General Adaur Akonko stepped out of the Congress Hall as the sun rose over Geneva. Behind her stood the leaders of every nation on Earth, presidents and prime ministers, kings and generals. Rivals who had never stood in the same room before now stood shoulder to shoulder. Cameras from every network on the planet focused on her face. "People of Earth," she began, her voice calm and steady, "you have seen what happened at the Galactic Assembly. You have heard what they think of us. You have watched them laugh at our history, mock our struggles, and vote to cage us like animals." She paused and let the words settle. "For 100 years, we have followed their rules. We have signed their treaties. We have limited our technology, our growth, our potential, all because they told us it was necessary for peace. We trusted them. We believed them." Her expression hardened. "That trust is broken. That belief is dead." She held up a document. It was thin, only a few pages, but the words on it would change everything. "This is the Declaration of Sovereign Withdrawal. As of this moment, Earth and all human territories renounce every treaty, agreement, and accord signed with the Galactic Assembly, all 2,847 of them. Effective immediately." A murmur ran through the crowd of journalists. This was not a negotiation. This was not a protest. This was a complete break. "We will not surrender our colonies," Okonkwo continued. "We will not accept observers. We will not submit to their oversight. We are not children to be supervised. We are not animals to be caged. We are human beings, and we will decide our own future." She lowered the document and looked directly into the cameras. "To the Galactic Assembly, I have only this to say. You wanted us gone. You made it very clear that we are not welcome in your community. So be it. We are leaving." She took a breath. "But understand this. We are not leaving because we are weak. We are leaving because we are done pretending to be weak. We are done accepting your limits. We are done asking for permission. The leaders behind her stood in perfect silence. There were no smiles, no celebrations. This was not a moment of joy. It was a moment of resolve. You laughed at us, Okonkwo said quietly. You called us primitive. You said we would never amount to anything. Perhaps you were right. Perhaps we are everything you said. Her eyes narrowed. Or perhaps you have made a terrible mistake. Perhaps you have taken a divided species and given them a reason to unite. Perhaps you have turned 8 billion individuals into one people with one purpose. She folded the document and placed it in her pocket. I suppose we will find out. The broadcast ended with 7 words displayed on every screen on Earth. You wanted use gone. We're leaving. Across the planet, humans read those words. They read them in English and Mandarin, in Spanish and Arabic, in Hindi and Swahili, and 100 other languages. And for the first time in human history, they all felt the same thing at the same moment. They felt like one people. And they smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had been pushed too far and had finally decided to push back. In the halls of the Galactic Assembly, the first reports of Earth's declaration arrived. Keth Varl read the words with growing disbelief. This was impossible. No species had ever rejected the assembly so completely. No species had ever dared. They are bluffing, he told his advisors. They have no choice but to comply. But even as he spoke, a cold feeling settled in his stomach. A feeling he had not experienced in centuries. It was doubt. And somewhere in the darkness of space, human ships began to move. The Dominion Coalition held an emergency meeting 3 days after Earth's declaration. Representatives from over 200 species crowded into the council chamber, all of them demanding answers. This is outrageous, the Ithkari ambassador hissed. They cannot simply reject the assembly's authority. There must be consequences. Keth Varl raised one of his 4 hands for silence. We are aware of the situation. Our legal experts are reviewing options for enforcement. Enforcement? A delegate from the Morvathi Collective rippled with angry colors. You mean war? Against humans? That hardly seems necessary. They are primitive. A single fleet could bring them to their knees. Several delegates murmured in agreement. Humans were weak. Everyone knew this. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were outdated. Their military was small. What could they possibly do against the combined might of the coalition? But then a young aide entered the chamber. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. He walked directly to Keth Varl and handed him a data tablet. Keth Varl looked at the screen. His 4 eyes went wide. Clear the chamber, he said quietly. What? The Ithkari ambassador stepped forward. We have a right to know what? I said, clear the chamber. Keth Varl's voice echoed off the walls. He had never raised his voice in the assembly before. Not once in 300 years. The delegates left in confused silence. Only Keth Varl's most trusted advisors remained. Show me everything, he said to the aide. The data tablet connected to the main display. Images began to appear, and the room fell silent. The first image showed a massive structure hidden inside an asteroid belt. It was a shipyard, but not like any shipyard the Coalition had ever seen. It was automated, run entirely by machines, and it was producing warships at a rate that should have been impossible. This facility has been active for at least 50 years, the aide said. Our intelligence services only discovered it yesterday. There are 12 more like it that we know of. Probably more that we haven't found. Keth Varl stared at the image. The technology limitation accords. They ignored them, the aide said. Completely. from the very beginning. The next image showed a human warship in detail. It looked nothing like the slow, clumsy vessels humans were supposed to have. This ship was sleek, fast, and covered in weapons. Their propulsion system is different from ours, the aide continued. They didn't copy galactic technology like everyone else. They developed their own from basic principles. Our engineers estimate these ships are at least 30% faster than anything in the Coalition fleet. That's impossible, one advisor whispered. There's more. The display changed to show a swarm of small drones, thousands of them moving in perfect coordination. Autonomous weapons, the aide said, banned under the Marshall Conduct Treaties. The humans never stopped developing them. These units can think for themselves. They can coordinate attacks without any human input. They can adapt to enemy tactics in real time. Keth felt the cold feeling in his stomach grow stronger. The aide brought up another file. This is perhaps the most disturbing discovery. Human intelligence agencies have been mapping Coalition military installations for decades. They know the location of every major fleet, every defense station, every supply line. They know our patrol routes, our communication frequencies, our command structures. How? Kethferl demanded. How did they gather this information without us knowing? The aide hesitated. We believe they used their diplomatic missions. Every human embassy, every trade delegation, every cultural exchange. All of them were gathering intelligence. We invited them into our homes, and they took notes on where we kept our weapons. Silence filled the room. One advisor finally spoke. The treaties. The restrictions. We thought we were limiting them. Controlling them. We were, Kethferl said slowly. We were limiting what they showed us, not what they actually did. The display changed one more time. It showed a list of every treaty humanity had signed over the past century. The Technology Limitation Accords, the Marshall Conduct Treaties, the Exploration Mandates, the Integration Protocols. We analyzed these agreements, the aide said. Every single one of them restricted human military development. Every single one of them required humans to adopt galactic technology instead of creating their own. Every single one of them kept humans away from resource-rich regions of space. He paused. We thought we were protecting the galaxy from a primitive species. But the humans knew what we were doing. They knew we were trying to keep them weak. And they decided to play along while they built something else in secret. Kethferl closed his 4 eyes. The truth was becoming clear, and it was terrible. We were not protecting the galaxy from humanity, he said quietly. We were restraining them. And now the restraints are gone. The Morvathi ambassador had been listening at the door. He pushed his way back into the chamber, his body pulsing with angry colors. This is all speculation. The humans are bluffing. They must be. Send the fleet to Earth. Call their bluff. They will surrender within days. Kethferl opened his eyes and looked at the ambassador with something close to pity. You still don't understand, he said. For 100 years, we laughed at them. We called them primitive. We treated them like animals. And for 100 years, they let us believe it. He gestured at the display, at the hidden shipyards and secret weapons and carefully gathered intelligence. They were never primitive, Kethferl said. They were patient. They knew we would underestimate them. They counted on it. Every insult, every restriction, every humiliation, they used it as cover while they prepared for this moment. Prepared for what? The Morvathi demanded. Kethferl didn't answer. Instead, he activated a communication channel. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a military officer, a general with gray hair and cold eyes. This is High Arbiter Kethferl of the Dominion Coalition, Kethferl said. I demand to know the meaning of your military preparations. The human general smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You demand? He laughed softly. You spent a century demanding things from us, telling us what we could and couldn't do, treating us like children. He leaned forward. We're not children, Arbiter. We never were. You just never bothered to look closely enough to see what we really are. And what are you? Kethferel asked. The general's smile faded. We're the species that survived ice ages and plagues. We're the species that split the atom and walked on our moon. We're the species that looked at the stars and refused to accept that we couldn't reach them. He paused. You asked how we hid our preparations from you. You really want to know? We didn't hide anything. You just never asked. You were too busy laughing at us to notice what we were building right in front of your eyes. The communication ended. Kethferel stood in the silent chamber, surrounded by advisors who had no advice to give. What do we do? One of them finally asked. Kethferel had no answer. For the first time in 300 years, he had no idea what to do. And somewhere in the darkness of space, human fleets were moving into position. 6 months passed after humanity's withdrawal. 6 months of tension, of watching, of waiting. The galaxy had expected Earth to collapse. Without access to galactic trade routes, without alien technology, without the protection of the Assembly, surely the humans would come crawling back. They would apologize. They would beg for forgiveness. They would accept their place. That didn't happen. Instead, human activity increased. Ships moved through space in patterns that made no sense to coalition observers. New stations appeared in the darkness between stars. Communication signals bounced between hidden locations that intelligence agencies couldn't find. The Dominion Coalition grew nervous, but the Ithkari hegemony grew impatient. Enough waiting, Supreme Commander Vethrix declared to his war council. The humans have defied the Assembly. They have rejected our authority. If we do not act, every minor species in the galaxy will think they can do the same. His advisors shifted uneasily. Reports from coalition intelligence had described human military capabilities in disturbing detail. But Vethrix dismissed these reports as exaggeration. They are still humans, he said. Soft creatures from a soft world. Our warriors have conquered 100 species. These hairless apes will be no different. He ordered 42 warships to the human colony world called New Cascadia. It was a small planet on the edge of human territory, home to about 2 million people. An easy target. A perfect demonstration of hegemony power. The fleet arrived 3 weeks later. Admiral Kethener commanded from the flagship Eternal Dominance. He had fought in 17 campaigns and never lost a battle. As his fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and New Cascadia appeared on his screens, he felt nothing but confidence. Scan the system, he ordered. Find their defense stations. His sensor officer worked for a moment, then frowned. Sir, I'm detecting an orbital defense grid. It's active. Active? Kethener leaned forward. How many stations? Unknown, sir. The readings are strange. There's interference. Kethener dismissed the concern with a wave of his claw. It doesn't matter. 42 ships against a colony defense grid? We'll tear through it in minutes. He opened a communication channel. Human colony of New Cascadia. This is Admiral Kethener of the Ithkari hegemony. You are in violation of Galactic Assembly Resolution 7742. Surrender immediately and prepare for occupation. You have 10 minutes to comply. Silence. Then a human voice responded. It was calm, almost bored. Admiral, this is Colonel Sarah Chun, New Cascadia Defense Command. I'm going to give you one chance to turn your fleet around and go home. Kethener laughed. His bridge crew joined him. One chance? He replied. You have 2 million civilians and a handful of defense satellites. I have 42 warships. You are in no position to make threats. I'm not making a threat, Colonel Chun said. I'm giving you a warning. What happens next is your choice. My choice is to end this conversation. You have 9 minutes. The channel closed. Kethaner turned to his tactical officer. Move the fleet into attack formation. Target their defense grid first, then the surface. The 42 ships began to spread out, their weapons charging. On 100 different screens across the galaxy, observers watched the feed from hegemony recorders. This would be a lesson for anyone who thought they could defy the established order. 8 minutes passed. 7. 6. Then everything went wrong. Space itself seemed to tear open. Points of light appeared inside the hegemony formation, between the ships, around them, everywhere. The lights became shapes. The shapes became ships. Human ships. They had arrived through faster-than-light travel directly inside the enemy formation. Every military textbook in the galaxy said this was impossible. The calculations required were too complex. The margin for error was too small. A mistake of a fraction of a second would mean appearing inside an enemy vessel, destroying both ships instantly. The humans hadn't made any mistakes. What? Admiral Kethaner never finished his sentence. The human ships opened fire at point-blank range. Energy weapons tore through hegemony shields that had never been designed for combat at such close distance. Missiles launched with no travel time, striking their targets before anyone could react. Then came the drones. Thousands of them poured out of the human ships. Each one was the size of a small fighter, but there were no pilots inside. They moved with perfect coordination, swarming around hegemony vessels like angry insects. They found weak points in armor and exploited them. They blocked escape routes. They cut off communications. The hegemony ships tried to respond. They fired their weapons blindly, hitting nothing. They attempted to retreat, but the human ships were everywhere. They called for help, but their signals were jammed. In the command center on New Cascadia, Colonel Chun watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. She sipped coffee and said nothing. 11 minutes after it began, the battle was over. 39 hegemony ships drifted dead in space. Some were torn apart completely. Others simply went dark as their crews surrendered or died. The automated drones moved through the wreckage, collecting survivors, tagging debris, already beginning to clean up. 3 ships remained functional. They were surrounded by human vessels, their weapons destroyed, their engines crippled. They could not fight. They could not run. Admiral Kethaner sat on his ruined bridge, surrounded by dead crew members. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His compound eyes stared at nothing. A human marine appeared through the smoke. He was tall and broad, wearing heavy armor that made him look even larger. Behind him came more marines, moving in perfect silence. Admiral Kethaner, the marine said, you are now a prisoner of the Terran Defensive Forces. You will be treated according to the rules of war. Your wounded will receive medical care. Your dead will be handled with respect. Kethaner looked up at the human. He had expected monsters. Savage creatures hungry for blood. Instead, he saw discipline, professionalism, calm. Why? He managed to ask. Why didn't you destroy all of us? The Marine gestured toward the viewport. Outside, the 3 surviving ships drifted helplessly. Those ships are going home, the Marine said. They're carrying a message. What message? The Marine's expression didn't change. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your resources. We don't want your empire. We want to be left alone. This is your only warning. He paused. Next time, we won't leave survivors. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. The recordings from surviving hegemony ships showed everything. The impossible arrival. The swarms of drones. The precise, devastating attack. The 11-minute battle. Species that had laughed at humanity went quiet. Species that had voted for restrictions began to reconsider. Species that had never paid attention to Earth suddenly became very interested. In his chamber on Concordance Prime, Keth Varl watched the recordings over and over. He watched the human ships appear from nothing. He watched the hegemony fleet die. And he finally understood. Humanity had not just been hiding their strength. They had been holding back. The battle at New Cascadia wasn't a real fight. It was a demonstration. A warning shot. They had used 40 ships to destroy 42. They could have used 400. They could have used 4,000. What have we awakened? Keth Varl whispered to himself. No one answered. But somewhere in the darkness of space, humanity was listening and waiting. The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session for the third time in 6 months. The great chamber that had once held thousands of confident delegates now felt smaller, darker, quieter. Empty platforms lined the upper levels where species had withdrawn from attendance. The laughter that had filled this room during humanity's humiliation was gone. High Arbiter Keth Varl stood at the center of the chamber and addressed the remaining delegates. Fellow members of the Assembly, he began, we face a crisis unlike any in our history. The human action at New Cascadia was not merely a battle. It was a message. A message we must answer with strength and unity. He paused, waiting for the murmurs of agreement that had always followed his words. Silence. I propose a joint military response, Keth Varl continued. The Dominion Coalition, working together with our allies, will assemble the largest fleet in galactic history. We will show humanity that their victory was a fluke. We will remind them that they faced the combined might of 4,000 species. More silence. Then the ambassador from the Volcari Consortium rose on her platform. She was a small creature, barely a meter tall, with delicate wings that glowed softly in the chamber light. High Arbiter, she said, the Volcari withdraw from the Dominion Coalition. Effective immediately. Keth Varl's 4 eyes widened. What? We have watched the recordings from New Cascadia many times. We have consulted with our military experts. They tell us that the human fleet used perhaps 10% of its true capabilities. They tell us that challenging humanity would be suicide. She spread her wings slightly. The Volcari have no interest in dying for your pride. Before Keth Varl could respond, another ambassador rose. Then another. Then a dozen more. The Morthian Trade Federation withdrew. The Crystalline Collective withdrew. The Seven Systems Alliance withdrew. One by one, species that had been members of the Dominion Coalition for centuries announced their departure. You cannot do this, Keth Varl shouted. We have agreements. Treaties, obligations. The Morthian ambassador, a creature of living metal, made a sound that might have been a laugh. Treaties? You mean like the treaties you imposed on humanity? The ones you used to keep them weak and controlled? He turned to address the chamber. We have all seen how the Coalition treats species it considers inferior. We have all watched you laugh at humans, mock them, humiliate them. And now we have all seen what happens when those same humans decide they have had enough. His metal body caught the light as he moved. The Morthians want no part of whatever comes next. We would rather take our chances with humanity than stand beside those who created this disaster. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Old alliances crumbled. New factions began to form. And in the middle of it all, Keth Varl stood alone. 3 weeks later, a new embassy opened on Concordance Prime. It was located in the section of the station that had once belonged to humanity, but the sign above the door said something different now. Terran Compact, Office of Diplomatic Relations Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the entrance hall. greeting a long line of visitors. They came from dozens of species, large and small, powerful and weak. They came with trade proposals and alliance offers. They came with apologies and requests for protection. The compact had grown to 47 member species in just 3 weeks. More were applying every day. These were the species that had voted against the restrictions on humanity. The species that had remained silent during the laughter. The species that had seen the Dominion Coalition for what it truly was and wanted something different. Elena smiled at each visitor. She shook claws and tentacles and appendages of every description. She listened to their stories and their offers. And she thought about the day, not so long ago, when she had stood alone in the assembly chamber while the galaxy laughed at her. How things had changed. A message arrived from Kethvarl requesting a private meeting. Elena considered refusing. Part of her wanted him to suffer, to wait, to feel the same helplessness she had felt. But she was better than that. Humanity was better than that. She agreed to the meeting. Kethvarl arrived at the compact embassy, looking smaller than she remembered. His gray skin seemed faded, and his 4 eyes had lost their glow. He walked slowly, like someone carrying a great weight. Elena met him in a small conference room. No guards, no witnesses. Just the two of them. Ambassador Vasquez, Kethvarl said. His voice was quiet. Thank you for seeing me. Elena nodded. Hi, Arbiter. Just Kethvarl Mao, he said. The Coalition has stripped me of my title. They needed someone to blame for this disaster, and I was the obvious choice. Elena said nothing. Kethvarl sat down heavily. I have come to ask what humanity wants. Reparations? Territory? A formal apology? Name your price, and I will try to deliver it. Elena studied him for a long moment. This was the being who had humiliated her, who had laughed at her species, who had tried to cage humanity like animals. We wanted respect, she said finally. That's all we ever wanted. To be treated as equals. To be seen as worthy of a place among the stars. Kethvarl nodded slowly. And now? Now? Elena walked to the window. Outside, human and allied ships patrolled the station's perimeter. The Terran Compact banner flew from dozens of diplomatic buildings. Representatives from across the galaxy hurried to meetings at the human embassy. Now you'll give us respect because you have no choice, Elena said. Not because you believe we deserve it. Not because you see us as equals. But because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. She turned to face him. That's not our failure, Kethvarl. It's yours. You could have welcomed us. You could have worked with us. You could have treated us as partners instead of pets. It would have cost you nothing, and you would have gained an ally that would have stood beside you for centuries. She shook her head slowly. Instead, you chose to laugh. And now you've lost everything. Kethvarl sat in silence. There was nothing he could say, because everything she said was true. Elena opened the door. Go home, she said. Tell whatever remains of your coalition that humanity has no interest in revenge. We're not going to conquer your worlds or destroy your fleets. We're not monsters, despite what you tried to make us. She paused. But we will never forget how you treated us. And we will never give you the chance to treat us that way again. Kethvarl rose slowly and walked toward the door. He stopped beside Elena and looked at her with his 4 tired eyes. If I could go back, he said quietly, I would change everything. Elena's expression softened, just slightly. I believe you, she said. But that's the thing about mistakes, Kethvarl. You don't get to unmake them. You only get to live with the consequences. He nodded once, then walked out of the embassy. Elena watched him go. Then she turned and walked back to her office, where a dozen new alliance proposals waited for her attention. Outside, the galaxy was changing. Old powers were fading. New alliances were forming. And at the center of it all stood humanity, no longer asking permission, no longer accepting limits, no longer hiding what they truly were. They had been mocked and humiliated. They had responded by becoming something greater. And now the galaxy would have to learn to live with the consequences.